This week on the Digital Marketing Scoop, it is all about LinkedIn. We've gone back on all our podcasts and pulled out all the content around LinkedIn. So if you're posting organically or using LinkedIn ads or haven't started using LinkedIn yet and are thinking about it, you're going to get an awful lot of value from this week's episode. Hope you enjoy it. In terms of LinkedIn ads, I suppose one thing we often from our side is that the cost of LinkedIn ads in comparison to other pay-per-click platforms is fairly, I would say, very high in comparison. How at the moment are you navigating that?
That's an excellent question, and you're totally right. LinkedIn, it's a very expensive medium. Where if you make a mistake, it may cost you a lot. However, the secret to LinkedIn ads is their audience. You can be so specific with the audience. The audience is there for a purpose. They're concentrated on a goal. And so if you have relevant content, then this is not a problem. This is actually something that will benefit you. So, I have clients that have very small audiences that have 75,000 people in their audience. So the smaller the audience, the more expensive. But because they're such high quality audience members, then it makes sense for them. Yeah. So, and also the profiles of the people in LinkedIn are mostly accurate. It's not like in Facebook that you pretend to be something else so you don't get targeted, or you created it back when you didn't know what really was going to happen to your data. LinkedIn, they're accurate because it's a professional network. So the quality of lead really is better. And we can be very surgical about who we target. So again, that CPC may be very high at the beginning, but once you nurture it, once you get it down to the cost per acquisition, it actually really works in your favor.
Yeah, I mean, when you know the particular job descriptions of people within organizations that your business needs to get in front of, and you're putting the right content in front of them. I mean, it's like any pay-per-click, I suppose. It just comes down to your return on ad spend at the end of the day. So if the click happens to be more expensive, it doesn't really matter as long as that return is there.
Yeah, and it just proves just that little bit more of an incentive to really have a strategy in place. Maybe actually the cost per click is one of those good things where you can go, right, we really need a strategy because otherwise it's just going to go haywire.
Yeah, you just need to keep an eye on the ball, right? Like, where do you want to go and what do you want to achieve at the end of this customer journey? And also, you can control your costs. Most people don't know that you can start slow. Like if you're new to LinkedIn ads, you can always control your CPCs and see where it gets you. See if you're spending enough of your budget. Let's say, as an example, I have a maximum CPC of $5 or $4, and that's it. I cannot pay more than that. Let's make a good audience. Let's put good content, and let's see if we can get there with that limit. And then once the algorithm has learned, then you can set it free and let the algorithm do its thing. But at the very beginning, you can actually control those costs a little bit more than in other platforms.
In terms then of the advertising platform, is that something you've ever worked with yourselves?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
yeah.
We're heavy into advertising.
we haven't used it an awful lot here.
No.
Mainly because we found in terms of, now I'm sure it's very different than recruitment, but for us, the cost in comparison to say Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, or Facebook, Google, Instagram, was just so much higher. That we felt we were getting a better return from those platforms. Now, I imagine in recruitment, it's that's exactly where the people you're looking for are. Yeah. So it's probably a different ball game. But in terms of, I suppose, from a marketing point of view, on the ad platform, would you have any tips for people?
Absolutely. So one is we found a way to kind of like start on LinkedIn and then include Facebook, Instagram, and Google, like I said, in that marketing ecosystem. So using the power of the pixels, we can run a campaign and spend a minimum amount on LinkedIn, but then that engages the right people. and we're able to kind of get their online profile ID and follow them around the internet with more cost-effective platforms like Facebook. So it's a really, it's a very high-level strategy, but executed properly, this is going to give you the most bang for your buck. I mean, we've generated with just $500 of ad spend, 3 recruitment deals, which is $50,000 in the back end.
That's a nice ROI. Yeah.
But if you're purely using a LinkedIn paid ads platform, again, make it value based. So think about what keeps your audience up at night. What are the things that they really care about? Maybe do a video on that. Maybe offer a tip sheet or some type of like X, Y, and Z playbook, something that's going to engage them, to give you their name, email, phone number, and then your salespeople, you yourself, is following up on the back end. So this way, you're not incurring that huge cost of just doing direct response advertising on LinkedIn, because it's pricey for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Most people aren't going to be on LinkedIn several times a day like they are on Facebook, right? I check my Facebook at least 3 times a day. I check my LinkedIn because of business 3 times a day, but if it wasn't because of business, I would be checking it maybe, once every other day, something like that. So your audience isn't going to be as frequently on LinkedIn. So that's why LinkedIn charges more, because to reach that audience, you kind of have to pay for it.
Yeah. I love the strategy though of using like LinkedIn ads initially to bring them in and then remarket on Facebook and Instagram. So you're like, you grab them once and it's like, okay, now I have you. You're going to see me everywhere else.
Yeah.
We were just wondering if you could give us any advice maybe around LinkedIn advertising, any mistakes or things to avoid, and maybe there's best practices that you would recommend.
Yeah. The thing about LinkedIn advertising is it's very easy to spend money. It's designed to part you from your cash. It's not the best designed product in the world, I'll be quite honest. And often I'll be helping people to set up accounts because it's a little bit clunky and it's not really, clear what's going on with it. However, I would say that the best thing to do in terms of LinkedIn advertising is to first focus on what you're doing organically. Because a lot of the advertising material that you can use on LinkedIn will be based on company updates or personal updates. And, you can see what's performing or not performing by looking at the track record of interactions that you get with that. So the first thing I would say about LinkedIn advertising is first look at what you've been doing and what has been succeeding, and then think about putting that content into your advertising campaign. The second thing I would say is to do little small tests. One of the most common mistakes I see with people is that they try to advertise to everyone on LinkedIn. Rather than saying, okay, everyone is my target audience, it depends on what your product or your service is. But what I always recommend people do is they narrow that down, even if they just do it and say, okay, I'm just going to sell this to people in Bradford, and I'm only going to look for people in Bradford. What that does is it narrows it down geographically, or you can do it by sector, or you can do it by job title, and you can combine a number of different factors. So what you can actually do is narrow down your audience to something as small as roughly 300 people. So try a small test, which might be a couple of thousand people in a specific area, and see what happens with that small test. Firstly, you're going to save money because you're not spending it on reaching the world, and you're not going to blow your budget in the first couple of days. Secondly, it will let you see what kind of responsiveness you're going to be getting. And one thing I also recommend that you do is a sort of third part of the, using LinkedIn advertising, is that you always do A/B tests. In other words, you have a different headline, but the same content and the same image. And you do another version of the advert and you run them against each other to see which one performs best. When you find what's performing best, you say, okay, we'll use that for our advertising, and then keep testing that again. You might have a different call to action. You might have a different color of, graphic or button on it. Keep testing until you find the content that's performing the best, and then spend more money on that, either by increasing your audience size or by increasing the amount that you're spending or you're bidding for. In terms of how much you pay for LinkedIn advertising, it is generally expensive. You can get better. Well, you can spend less money to get visitors to your website if you use something like Google Ads or Facebook advertising. but you're reaching a more defined audience within LinkedIn. And the key thing is to define that audience first and think about your customer personas and say, who are we trying to reach here? I still get quite a lot of companies advertising like, great medical procedures or, a new analgesic service, and it's completely irrelevant. They see the word doctor in my job title, or they see it in my company page title, and then they assume that I'm a medical doctor. Disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor. I do have an honorary degree, and I am a doctor, but I'm not a medical doctor. But still, people try to reach me, and they're not using the right criteria. They're not using the right industry, because I'm not in the medical industry. It's a very straightforward search facility that you have within the advertising to say, this is who I want to reach. So do it to small numbers first, test it out first, try it out on a small, cheap audience. The other thing you can do with this is, rather than paying for clicks, you can pay for 1,000 impressions, which is, in the first stages, is much more valuable, because you want to reach as broad an audience as you can and see what they're clicking on, what they're interested in. And then you can devise a better campaign, which you can roll out into more geographies, or to a broader audience, or to different industries, or so forth. It's quite a sophisticated tool. And like Facebook advertising, you can hone it down to a very specific audience, a very small audience, to see, these are the people I want to reach. Occasionally, I'll do consulting for companies and help them with LinkedIn advertising. There's a company that I've been working with for a number of years now, and their target audience is actually really quite small. It's maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people globally, and they spend £50 or £60 a month reaching that audience, and that's all they're interested in reaching, because they have the right job title in the right industry, and they know what content is performing best for them. They have different campaigns for Eurasia, for the Americas, and specifically for the UK, because they're a UK-based organization. But they're getting very good results, spending very small amount of money. And it is expensive in relative terms, but it doesn't mean that you need to spend a lot of money to get your audience. There are also quite a lot of different types of advertising that you can produce for LinkedIn. You can have text-only adverts, you can have kind of videos, you can have different types of content. There's also one which is quite interesting to look at for lead generation, where, for example, you might have a download or a white paper that you want to give people, but you're going to ask them for their details in the same way that you do on a website. You'd have a form, and you fill in the form, and you get your reward by getting your PDF file or whatever it may be. But what you can do with LinkedIn is you can have a lead generation tool where I just have to, as a user, just click once, and it will fill in all the fields from my LinkedIn profile, and then it sends it to you. So it's a very good way of getting good qualified leads without either the friction of someone having to fill in all their details, or the problem of people filling in inaccurate details. There's nothing worse than getting somebody filling in a form and they fill in an incorrect name or an incorrect country or phone number, or they might even get their email address wrong. So then both people end up being frustrated. So I would say that you've got to take a very sort of slow approach to it, and build up from a small audience to a large audience gradually, and test different types of content. That's the best way to approach it. And in the first place, you should only be using the kind of content that you know is already performing well from your organic results that you looked at and monitored.
You're getting a lot of engagement. You're going to get a lot of comments. You're probably going to end up dealing with a bit of conflict on the platform as well, potentially on LinkedIn. How do you deal with that yourself?
So in terms of conflict, what do you mean? Do you mean
in terms of negative comments?
Okay.
Or else as well, maybe push back on content as well and things like that.
Yeah, no, interesting question. I think well, a lot of people, I think, understand quite well is that LinkedIn is a professional network. So it is your reputation in a sense. And I think that whatever you do, whatever your activity is, whether that's posting a piece of content, whether that's commenting on a piece, whether that's sharing a podcast or an article, it's seen by your entire network at some point. So I think that people refrain from posting negative comments in fear that it will damage their brand, it will damage their reputation. LinkedIn thus far has been the most amazing and supportive and positive platform that I've ever been on. I've come from YouTube, so I used to make a lot of content. I used to make vlogs on YouTube that never really went very well, but it's just pure hate on YouTube. It's just trolls and it's just negativity. And coming over to a platform where people genuinely want to support you and see you grow is amazing. So I don't think there's necessarily been conflict. I think from time to time you'll get, whether that comes from jealousy or something else, a person that just is just frustrated or is annoyed. But I think that's more of a personal issue for themselves rather than something that I've done. I think, people might see, and this isn't to toot my own horn, I'm not famous or anything like that, but people might see a piece of content of mine reaching 50,000 people and they'll reply, it's not very good. And that comes from jealousy. It comes from wishing that they had been able to do that themselves. But yeah, I've always been very, thoroughly supported, and I like to do the same for other people. So, if people are wanting to get on LinkedIn, or if people are wanting to make content, LinkedIn's a great platform because you are just going to be supported. It is just positivity and love in that sense. There's really no hate. So it's a very easy platform to ease yourself into that content creation process. Any other platforms is a completely different story.
You make a very good point there, actually. If somebody is looking to start doing video content, and especially if they're in the B2B space, LinkedIn is a much, for want of a better word, safer environment than, let's say, publishing content on YouTube or Twitter, or, where you, as you say, you're going to have bots, trolls, the whole lot. That especially if you're starting out, the last, people are always afraid of the first video going up and then this wave of negative feedback coming at them. That is, if they're going to do it, LinkedIn's probably the safest spot.
Yeah, it's the safest bet, yeah.
Totally agree.
And totally agree. There you mentioned as well, Joe, about LinkedIn it is a professional network, and that's what it used for, and that's what it is. But personal content tends to work a little better. Do you find that there's any kind of conflict in your mind when you're going, this is a really kind of personal piece of content? Is it perfectly suitable for LinkedIn, or do you think that actually LinkedIn is becoming a little bit more of kind of a mixture between personal and professional content?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, because for the last few years, LinkedIn has been very professional, and I don't think people have really understood how to attract people or how to kind of get those clicks from people. But what we've got to remember is every person behind this image, this professional image, is a human. They're a person. They've, the most corporate CEOs who run a 500 billion pound empire still have kids and still go to the pub and still watch TV. They're still people. So they're going to like to watch and consume content that is authentic or is real or is personable. They are human. They don't want to watch something that's silly or corporate or too professional, because it's going to bore the hell out of them. So I think that I don't really know what the line is in terms of professional and personal, or whether, the definition of professional is now just being human. I don't know. This is a huge conversation to have. But I think that LinkedIn's becoming a lot more accepting of that sort of content, of the openness and that authentic approach. Just because people buy from people. It's not B2B, it's human to human. That's what I've always said. And I think, if that's what you like to do, if your fear of getting into content creation is that you have to be in a suit and tie and you have to sell and shout your products and services, don't worry, because you can create a vlog, you can create a day in the life of me or something, and people will watch that. You'll have people who love that because you have an amazing personality. They don't buy your products and services, they buy you. And I stick by that. I really stick by that.
It's authentic. I think that's the thing that has to come across. And when you do that really pure salesy video, pushing that out, you're not going to get the engagement levels. It's not what people want to see.
Yeah.
If you've got a great story, or you're being authentic, or you're talking about something that actually happened during the day, that's much better for your brand than like a flashy sales video at the end of the day.
Yeah. Absolutely. I posted a piece of content a couple of days ago on LinkedIn that was how not to sell on LinkedIn or something like that, and I had got the salesy messages over the last year. I don't know if you guys watched it at all, and put it up, and it was so well received. And it just goes to show, people don't want to be sold to. It's as simple as that. But they can't get it into their heads that that's how it works. They don't understand that by being human, you actually sell. You know, I mean, how often do you guys get sales messages on LinkedIn saying, do this, you know, all
I
the
got
time?
one the other day. Hey, what was it? Good morning, sir. And I was like, oh no, it's all downhill from
Copy
here.
and paste it.
Yeah.
But even probably you posted that video, you probably got, just because of that video, like 20 in-mail messages just selling you again.
I did. That's the reason. The worst one, I had someone say, hi, Jamie, and I thought, you haven't even learnt my name. That's dreadful.
Well, he forgot to change it after he pasted it in.
That's true. But there's definitely a balance. I don't think you can be too personal. I've seen a half-naked bloke on LinkedIn, and people praised him for it. I've never understood it. I don't know what I don't know what the balance is, but it's becoming a lot more personal. It's becoming like a professional Facebook, I think, which is I love it. I absolutely love it. I can't fault it.
Do you have any more questions, Jen?
Yeah, I guess the only one I would have really is, do you think that how can people really leverage the organic reach on LinkedIn at the moment? I know it's really kind of powerful at the moment. I mean, especially if you're not using LinkedIn ads just because of the expense of that, but companies can really kind of do a lot with the organic reach on LinkedIn at the moment. So how kind of frequently would you suggest companies be posting, and should they diversify the content that way as well?
Absolutely. So the reason why LinkedIn Organic is so powerful right now is because LinkedIn doesn't have enough content to support its users. It's kind of like Facebook 4 or 5 years ago, where whenever you post new piece of content, LinkedIn's actually going to push that content in front of your existing connections, and it's going to say, hey, David Taz has this new update, check it out. That's free advertising. That's what the people using the paid ad platform is paying, hundreds of dollars for. So you're getting that for free organically. So if you're not taking advantage of that, shame on you right now. and number two, just remember, like I would get a piece of paper, and I would write down how do we help our prospects, our clients, right? And then write down what are the top 3 things that they're worried about, what are the top 3 things that they care about. So make a list, and then you're going to make your content based off of what your prospects care about, not what you care about, what they care about. Then you're making these content pieces, and you're going to find that, man, it's very easy to kind of relate your service or your product, your business back to that issue, back to that pain point, because the reason why you exist is to solve a problem. So you're talking about the initial problems, and you're bringing it back to your business. If you do that, you're going to be a cut above the rest. You're going to stand out from your competitors, and you're going to generate leads, which is going to turn into business for your company.
One of the important things to bear in mind about the organic reach on LinkedIn is that there is still an algorithm at work. So you've still got restrictions. And, if you produce a piece of information and send it out to the world, the whole world is not going to see it. It's going to be a percentage of your network that sees it. And then it'll pick up signals as people share it, comment on it, and interact with it, so that it will then go to a broader audience. And there's a lot you can do as an organization to help that happen by having members of your staff interact with things, and not just liking it, but adding a little bit of value with a comment. And of course, you've got to remember that every organization, even if it's quite small, has a network effect, so that, if I've got 100 contacts, you've got 100 contacts, Mark, you've got 100 contacts, then it works outwards. So by just posting something and hoping that there's some reaction to it, it's often not enough. But the key thing is you don't have to spend on advertising necessarily to get good reach. And it can obviously, you have the desired effect is kind of going viral and reaching a broader audience than might be your, original sort of network. And that's a great advantage. A lot of it is the serendipity of it, where you'll reach people who, because someone in their network mentioned something, they then see you, they're more aware of you, they'll then maybe start to follow your company page, they'll start to follow individuals in your company or connect with them. And it's a long game though. You're not going to get success overnight. You've got to really apply yourself to it. And I have a simple thing called a 5-a-day diet, which I recommend people follow, which is just 5 simple things to keep yourself in front of your network and keep sharing things with them. But organically, it's a lot better than most things like Twitter or Facebook are really, you've got to pay to play there. But it's still the case with LinkedIn that you don't need to do that.
So I suppose in terms of standing out on LinkedIn, Jack, any kind of tips you'd have for people around that? Which are specifically with video content.
Because everyone, a lot of people are making videos now, and you know, there's a lot of the same kind of format and stuff. Is there any kind of little tricks you'd have around or tips?
Yeah, I think that's another good one. I think you touched on something there that is again a big conversation, that people are jumping on video, but they're doing the same thing as everybody else. They're posting at the same time. They're making the same content. They're filming in portrait mode on their iPhone with no captions, and you know, the content itself is good. If you take the time to listen to it, they know what they're talking about. They're trying to give value, but they just have a lack of understanding and knowledge of how to grab that attention. So I think tip number one would be something along the lines of, I think you've got to be bold. I think you've got to be different and not be afraid to be personable. I think, you know, as soon as you get on an iPhone and you make a portrait video, you've already failed, because LinkedIn is now becoming, like you say, it's becoming saturated. And the more people who make content, just like YouTube, you know, the reason it's hard to grow on YouTube is because people don't put the effort into standing out. They are hoping that it's going to work. And it's the same thing with LinkedIn. If you are hoping that it's going to work by doing the same thing as everybody else, it isn't going to. And that's, you know, that's just the brutally honest truth. You've got to put effort in, because when it works, it seriously works, and the return of investment is massive. You know, it's a proper strategy. It isn't just, oh, I'm just going to go on video for fun. It's a serious marketing strategy that if you pull it off, it works incredibly well. I think, you know, I've always thought, why should I give a business my time of day if they don't make me? You know, and some people say that's a little bit arrogant or it's a little bit rude. It's true. Why do you guys care about a business that are posting awful content? You don't. You want them to make you want to know about them. So I think tip number 2 would be things like give value. And whatever value that is, I don't know. It could be information around how to do something. It could be a tutorial. It could be an update. That's up to what you do in your industry and your audience, I guess. I think that's quite a big part that people get stuck on. It's the how. It's the what do I create? And I just ask people, you know, well, what do you like to consume? What do you like to watch? And then often they say, oh, nothing to do with business. So, well, make content that isn't to do with business. You know, people are human. People aren't robots. They like to enjoy. Consuming content it's a break for a lot of people. It's when they're on the commute home. It's when they don't want to consume work. They're flicking through YouTube. They want to be entertained. There's a great phrase from 2 guys called Dan and Lloyd, who run a company called Knowlton, who call it advertainment. And it's entertaining advertising, which I think is brilliant. And it's selling, but it's entertaining at the same time. And I think that would probably be what I would try and do. You know, there's loads and loads and loads of courses out there that charge you a fortune to learn how to do things. To learn it on YouTube. You know, there's thousands of free tutorials online. Yeah. You know, I've never understood those sorts of things, how people can charge you thousands and thousands of pounds for information that you can learn for free if you just spend a bit of time learning it yourself. You know, we've all got to start somewhere, and if I was to show you my first video, holy God, it was awful. It was dreadful.
Is it on YouTube?
It's blocked from YouTube.
Oh, totally. I'm going to put the link in on the show notes.
No, I'm not doing that. But, you know, we've got to start somewhere. And it's like we said at the very start, if you don't do it, or if you spend time pondering over how can I do it, you're wasting time actually doing it. And you're never, ever, ever going to learn if you don't start. There are always going to be awful first videos, but if you look back on that in 6 months' time and go, that was great, you haven't progressed, and you will have. So, yeah, that was quite a lot of information there, but that would kind of be my tips and tricks, really.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think that one of those things people always say is, you know, it's video. People didn't want to do it for so long that people were just literally saying, look, you just literally need to take out your phone, put your face in front of it or face it the other way and just start talking. But no one actually kind of said, and learn a little bit of editing or learn a little bit of just cut and chop or just very basic stuff. Like, I wouldn't be a videographer by no means, but you know, just a little bit of a cut and paste here and there makes things a little better.
And there's so many free tools even on your phone.
Yeah,
loads.
Exactly,
Loads. I started out with iMovie, which is you get it for free when you get a Mac, or iPhones have it. That's what I started on, and it's got the basics, but the basics are good enough if you're just starting out to learn new things. There's nothing wrong with starting out with free software. There's another great guy called Richard Bohr who I sat down with for about an hour or so the other week and had a chat, and he highlighted this really interesting point, and it was, if it benefits the business, you have to do it. There's no two ways about it. And he used the analogy of his kids. So he's got 2 kids, and when it's 3 a.m. in the morning and one of them's crying, he doesn't want to get out of bed, but he has to for the benefit of the kid. Same thing with business. You don't want to get behind the camera because some will be uncomfortable, some will find it really awkward, but you have to. It's where business is going. If you're not online and making good content, it's going to be incredibly hard to be seen, especially in 3, 4, 5 years time, when hundreds of thousands of companies have got good reputations or got great communities or great brands established because of the content they've made. You're going to regret not making it. So that's another thing.
I'm totally robbing that comparison for my next sales meeting. Next time a client is like, no, I'm not going on camera, I'm like, would you do it for your kids?
Yeah. Love it. No, it's a great saying. It's a really great saying.
It is.
And
that's brilliant.
It's so true. It's so true.
And in terms of specific content then, so whether it's video, imagery, presentations, what do you find is working really well from an engagement point of view?
Video is number one, like Mike Tyson in the 80s right now. You get 10 times the engagement. It not only allows you to convey your message, but also, just like we're doing here, they get to see your face, hear your voice. You're kind of becoming a micro celebrity to your audience, to your prospects. So this way, when you do have meetings and you do have deals in place, they're going to, it really helps kind of move things along. So I would say all of it's important, but if you had to choose one, I would definitely go with video.
Yeah. Even something I found from the podcast is going into meetings afterwards, and kind of people, they feel like they almost know you already, even though it's actually the first time you're meeting them face to face.
Oh yeah. Or even I've gone to some of our client meetings, and Joe, they've asked me a question, and then they've gone, I've already heard you say that. So like I'm just repeating myself to them again.
The best is when they take one of your points and they say it to you, and you're like, that's a really good point.
That's really good. You're a genius.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of the Digital Marketing Scoop. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please jump into your Apple Podcasts, your Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, and just make sure to follow and subscribe. Also, if you'd like to leave a review if you enjoyed the episode, I'd absolutely love for you to do that. We put out an episode every single week, all with digital marketing tips, case studies, ways to build your business with digital marketing. Also, if you are interested in bringing your own business online or looking at scaling your business, we'd love to chat with you here at CLIQ. You can visit us online at CLIQ.ie.